Good day, folks. Hope you're all doing good. We've had a look at the installation of Solaris 11 using live media, text install, and automated install. We also took a look at the service management facility in Solaris 11. We hopefully have some understanding on the ZFS file system in Solaris 11 operating system. In this episode, the idea is to walk you through network configuration in Solaris 11 operating system. Solaris 11 operating system brought about huge amount of changes in networking. Some of the commands that we were used to for several years at stretch were put to rest in Solaris 11. A new command took its place. Some of the old commands continue to exist in Solaris 11 but is enhanced to support more switches. So without wasting any time talking, let's get started with the configuration of networking in Solaris 11 operating system. Like any other previous video you would have watched in this playlist, we continue to work on virtualized environments here. The VirtualBox Manager is what you get to see on my screen. The two virtualized environment that we would play around with in this episode also is the S11 desktop and text installation. In fact, we will use the S11 desktop to connect to the S11 text here. So these are the two desktops. These are the two virtualized environment that we would use in this episode as well. So let's go to the S11 desktop, which is a live media based installation of Solaris 11. As a matter of fact, we may not be using this environment. We would use this to connect to our remote machine, which is the S11 text. So let's use the SSH to remotely connect to the S11 server, supply the password for this user, and switch user to the root environment there. Again, I have to remind you that as far as possible, please do not stay on the hash root because it's the super user. It's a dangerous proposition to have your terminal on the hash prompt all the time. Please switch user to the root only when it is required to perform some administrative command, or you could always use the sudo command to perform administrative activities, as long as the user has sufficient privilege to perform that administrative activity. For convenience, of course, and the interest of time, we would stay as a root user in this terminal, but that's certainly not a recommended way of operating. The topic of networking is very vast in Solaris 11 operating system, and it's hardly possible to cover entire networking in just one episode. So if time permits, we would have a separate video tutorial on many aspects of Solaris 11 networking, like what NCP is. NCP stands for Network Configuration Profile, what a location profile is, how we create a network configuration profile, how we create a location profile, how we activate network configuration profile and location profile, etc. So those topics we would keep aside for probably a different day. What we will understand in this episode are those new commands introduced in Solaris 11 that can be used to configure IP addresses on various network ports that exist on the machine. We will also take a look at how we can achieve high availability in networking, how we can perform virtualization, how we can create virtual network interface cards in Solaris 11 operating system, which in itself is a very important topic, especially something that we really require when we start configuring zones in Solaris 11. So I hope the expectation is set correctly here. This episode is in no way going to teach you the entire networking concepts in Solaris 11. It's only going to touch upon the basic networking administration in Solaris 11, and for that there are a number of new commands introduced in Solaris 11, and some of the old commands also have been enhanced. So those commands we would take a look at in this segment of Solaris 11 video. The first thing that we probably might want to take a look at is the SMF service that is responsible for configuring network in Solaris 11. As you can see, there is a service management facility service called network/physical, which is responsible for network configuration in Solaris 11 operating system. In case if you happen to land on an 11.0 machine, be aware that you would end up seeing two service management facility services. One is network/physical:default, and the second one network/physical::nvam. nvam stands for Network Auto Magic. From 11.1 onwards, these two services were merged into one service. It's highly unlikely that you would end up working on an 11.0 because it's been quite some time since the 11.0 was released, and many upgrades came after that. So it's likely that you will never see, or you will never work on an 11.0. But just in case if you happen to land on a machine that runs 11.0, then you will see two services for networking. One is network/physical::default, and the second one is network/physical::nvam. nvam stands for Network Auto Magic. You might remember from the service management facility episode, I hope you have fair understanding of SMF at this stage of our discussion. There are a number of properties that each of these service has. Now, one of the important properties, this particular service also has a number of properties, but one that is very important for our discussion now is a property called active_NCP. It simply translates to what is the active network configuration profile. So let's find that out. I run the command svcprop to find out the properties of the service network/physical::default, and I'm only interested in a property called active_NCP. The output that I'm keen to take a look at is the first line, which says the active_NCP is default fixed. Now there are many possibilities here. Default fixed is something that you would see common when your IP addresses are manually assigned. Or in other words, please do not confuse this with DHCP and static IP address. The network configuration profile has nothing to do with static or manual IP addresses. In fact, you would also see a string automatic against active_NCP. That doesn't mean DHCP. Automatic is just a name of another network configuration profile where IP addresses are fetched using DHCP for network cards, but not necessarily. You could always manually assign an IP address. Again, at this stage, if you're not familiar with these terms, please do not worry too much on this. The only idea here is to show the value for active_NCP that's default fixed. Now, if it's default fixed, it only means to say that you're going to configure networking manually and you're not going to rely on any profiles. If it's other than default fixed, if it's a different value like automatic or some other name, then that means you're going to configure your networking using some profiles. You have predefined profiles that says so and so network interface port, so and so network port is to be given these static IP addresses, and you just activate that profile and the network is going to be configured based on what is defined in that profile. But default fixed, if you see it as a value for active_NCP for network/physical::default, then that means all the networking configuration is going to be done manually. So we will focus only on this value for the time being. In fact, we will dedicate this episode only for default fixed, but be aware of the fact that there could be a different value under active_NCP there, and that value is mapped. That value is actually the name of a profile that is used to configure networking. And if the profile is default fixed, it means you're going to manually configure the networking using the commands that exist in Solaris 11 operating system. So this is where we stand. There is one service management facilities service used to configure networking, that is network/physical::default, and we are keen on one of the properties of that service, which is active_NCP. The value of active_NCP is default fixed, meaning your network configuration of Solaris 11 is going to be done manually by the administrator, which is what we're going to do now. So let's clear the screen. One of the first commands that I would run here is to find out the network ports that exist on my system. There is a command for that, it's dladm. Remember, when we look at the TCP/IP stack, I mean, if you recall the TCP/IP stack, we have a physical layer, we have a data link layer, we have a network layer, and we have the transport layer and the application layer, etc. So we will focus on the first three layers. We have physical layer, we have data link layer, and we have network layer from the bottom to the top, like 1, 2, 3. So this dladm command is a command that runs on the physical layer and the data link layer. Meaning, if you want to look at the physical port, you will use the dladm command. If you want to look at the link status of the network port, you would use a dladm command. But when it comes to networking, that is the third layer of the TCP/IP stack, where you configure IPv4 addresses, then the command used is ipadm. So you might want to keep this rule of thumb in your mind, that there are two commands that you would use often. One is dladm command, which operates at the physical layer and the data link layer. The second is the ipadm command, which operates at the IP layer, network layer, where you set the IP addresses, etc. So we have dladm show -fis. That's the command which you could use to list down the network ports that exist. Maybe for the sake of clarity, I can reduce the size of the font here so that you get to see everything in a single. As you can see, maybe a little bit more. That makes it easy. I think this probably, I'll just clear the screen and say dladm show -fis. And you can see that there are 4 network ports for this box. Of course, I'm using a virtual machine here, and I have added 4 ports just in case if you want to take a look at it. Let me go back to my VirtualBox manager here, and this is the machine that we are accessing now. If I go to the settings of this machine and to network here, you can see there are 4 adapters possible for this virtual machine, and in fact I have enabled all the 4 adapters, and that's the reason you're able to see 4 Ethernet ports on my box. Now what is interesting here is that if you have familiarity with the previous versions of the Solaris operating system, there were different names for different types of ports. We used to have BGE cards. It's like BGE0, BGE1, BGE2, etc. We had E1000 cards, E1000G0, E1000G1. We had QFE cards, QFE0, QFE1. So it was important to know the name of that card, because the IP addresses used to be configured in a file that was mapped to the name of the card itself. So if there was a card E1000G0 connected to the Solaris box, you would have had a file by the name /etc/hostname.e1000G0, and that's where you specified the host name, which in turn maps to the IP address. From Solaris 11 onwards, a sanity naming convention was introduced for the network ports. So instead of relying on the underlying names like E1000G0, E1000G1, etc., they used a standard naming convention, which is net0, net1, net2, net3, etc. So it's like netx. Regardless of what port name you have on your box, be it BGE0, BGE1, BGE2, BGE3, or E1000, E1001, E1002, E1003, doesn't really matter. It eventually maps to a sanity naming convention called netx. So you would only be worried about net0, net1, net2, net3, and not the actual name of the network ports used in your machine. That's why you get to see the name of the link is net1, net2, net3, net0, etc. Of course, these names can be changed. Tomorrow, if you feel like giving a name for a network port based on your business units within the organization, it's possible. dladm command has options to rename the link, but that's not very important for us. So we will stick to the names like net0, net1, net2, net3, at least for our demonstration. You can also see only one of the network ports is up, which is net0. So you can see the state is up here. There are different switches you could use with this dladm command, like dladm show -fis -m as an example. to fetch the MAC address of your network port. You can see that the MAC address is also being used here. So the first command that I wanted to highlight here, of course, in the physical layer of the TCP/IP stack, is the dladm show-fis, which would list the network ports that exist on your machine. The second command is to find out whose link is up. So maybe let me clear the screen and say show-link, and you can see that only one of the network ports has its link up. Of course, I have gotten into the link layer of the TCP/IP stack business. So again, there is only one port that has its link up. I would like to configure my net1, or maybe before I do that, I want to know what is configured on net0. Of course, now we are getting into the next layer of the TCP/IP stack. It is the network layer. I want to find out what IP address is configured on net0. The command, you would remember I mentioned to you, is ipadm, not dladm. So the command is ipadm show-addr, and you can see that. Please do not worry about all the output there. You can just focus on this one line, which is net0/v4. I think it's very easy to decode what is there on this line. What type of IP address is this? It's a static IP address or a DHCP. That's what you get to see. Remember, default fixed is the value of the active NCP here. And I told you default fixed does not mean static IP address. It could be a DHCP IP address also. I could manually run this command ipadm to configure my network port to fetch its IP address from DHCP. So default fixed or automatic NCP does not mean manual static IP address and DHCP respectively. It's just that you have to configure the networking manually, whether you're configuring a static IP address using the manual commands, or you're configuring a DHCP IP address, DHCP using the commands, doesn't really matter. So here static means it's a static IP address. It could be DHCP. State seems to be okay. You can also see the IP address here, which is 192.168.0.100, and the default net mask, of course, is /24, which is the CIDR format of 255.255.255.0. So that's what this line says. But what is interesting is also this string, which is net0/v4. I think we know what net0 is. Net0 is the name of the port, but we are not familiar with what that v4 is. Let's call that string as address object. Net0 can have multiple IP addresses. It is possible to have multiple IP addresses on the net0. That /v4, it need not be v4. Of course, in this case, it is kind of giving us an indication that it's an IPv4 address, but it need not be v4. It could be any other string for that matter. Now, that particular string is what uniquely identifies a specific address of the net0. So tomorrow, if we are configuring net1 as we want to configure an IP address on net1, I would have something like net1/tag1. I will have one IP address on the net1, and for the second IP address, I would use a different string after /. So that address objects uniquely identifies a specific IP address on a network port. So I will, once we go through that command, probably this is going to be more clear, but then that string net0/v4, mind you that v4, it need not be v4, it could be any other string, but that string is what uniquely identifies an IP address on a specific network port. So let's configure net1. Net1, as you can see, is not up. The link is not up. The first thing that we use is run the command ipadm create-ip net1. So this is going to bring the link up on net1. Let's verify that. dladm show-link. Now you can see that the net1 link is also up. That's nice, but we haven't set any IP address on net1 yet, meaning if we run ipadm show-addr, we are not going to see net1 listed in there. Of course, the next step then is to assign an IP address for net1. Let's do that. We say ipadm create-addr. Now, What is interesting is to keep in mind here that ipadm command has many subcommands. You only need to remember dladm command and ipadm command to administer most part of the networking in Solaris 11 operating system. And what is also more important is that if you're familiar with other versions of Solaris, you probably would have had to edit some files for these networking changes to take effect. That is no longer the case. Whatever you run here is going to persist across a reboot. There are no files that you're expected to modify. So the administration has become easy with Solaris 11 operating system. You just need to run these commands and networking changes are taken effect immediately. So I say ipadm create -addr. The next, of course, is what type of IP address would you like to assign to this network port, and that's static. You would know the other option, of course, is to use the DHCP there. What is the address that you want to assign? Maybe 192.168.0.150. What is the network net mask? That's /24. If you don't do that, then it's default /24. That's 255.255.255.0. And what is the network port on which you want to assign this IP address? That's net1. In fact, I'm expected to give an address object here. You will remember the address object to be network port /some string. If I forget to give a string here, it's going to automatically pick up /v4. For the next IP address, it's going to pick up /v4a. The third IP address, it's going to pick up /v4b, so on and so forth. Instead of that, let's give a tag here, which is data1. Remember, this is the address objects. net1/data1 is the address object. So now an IP address is assigned to the net1 interface. Let's verify that. ipadm show -addr. As you can see, there is this address object network/data1, which has an IP address 192.168.0.150/24. I can do the same thing here for a second IP address. ipadm create -addr -t static -a 192.168.0.151/24 on the same port, which is net1, but I'm going to give a different tag because it has to be a unique name. This is like an alias for that network port. In Solaris 10 and the previous versions of Solaris, it used to be, if the card name was BG0, it used to be BG0:1, BG0:2, BG0:3, etc. These were the aliases that were created in Solaris 10 and the previous versions of Solaris, but here we are using address objects, which is /some string, to uniquely identify that IP address there. Now let's say ipadm show -addr will show you the second IP address as well. It's not really important that you know where these configuration is saved, because it's going to persist across the reboot, but for academic purpose, if you really want to know where it is saved, we can actually look at ipadm default -fixed.conf. You can see that this file is getting populated with the IP address that we mentioned. And again, please do not tamper with this file. You're not supposed to edit this file. In fact, you probably may not see this file being mentioned, at least in the documentation around networking. You probably would have to dig deep to find out, which file has all this information. It's only for academic purpose that I've mentioned this file name here. It's not going to be used at all. So we have this IP address here listed on net1. Now let's try to remove it so that we are familiar with the command that is used to remove that IP address. And before I do that, there used to be a command in Solaris 10 and 9 which we have used probably a number of times to assign IP addresses, unassign IP addresses, and the command is ifconfig. The command is no longer used in Solaris 11, but it continues to exist for backward compatibility. We probably did not want anyone to get a heart attack when they run this command ifconfig, and if it says it doesn't exist, that probably would not have looked good. So for backward compatibility, there is this, I wouldn't say backward compatibility, the command continues to exist in Solaris 11 as well, but we no longer use it. ifconfig -a command will also fetch us the same output that will give me net1 net1:1, this is nothing but net1/data1, this is net1/data2. So again, just mentioning this command here, ifconfig -a, purely for academic reason. We are not going to use this command at all at any point in time. It's always going to be dladm and ipadm command. So now that we have set the IP address here, we can also remove it by running the command ipadm delete -addr net1/data2, and we can verify that the IP address has vanished. We can run the command ipadm delete -addr net1/data1. That's also gone. Now we can say dladm show -link. You can see that the net1 link is still up, so I can say ipadm delete -ip net1, and that brings it down. So we just did a reverse process of unconfiguring a network interface card. So we plumbed the network port, we assigned an IP address, then we unassigned the IP address, and then we unplumbed the network port. So I hope that part of basic network configuration is clear. Now we will take a look at high availability configuration in Solaris 11.